Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Lee Benson. It's great to have you join us today.
So good to be here, Rocky. Thanks for having me.
And I am excited for the conversation. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. Bit of background. I've started 8 companies from scratch. One company I don't really count, but it was like running a business in the 80s. I played over 1,000 nights on stages, concerts, clubs. Played guitar and sang in a rock and roll band. That's how I made most of my money back then. And then fast forward to early 90s, basically bought a company for its debt, had 25 employees. I was sort of the general manager. We lost all of our business overnight. My boss said, close her to sell it. You got 30 days. I couldn't find anybody to buy it. And I said, look, I've got this idea that you don't believe in, but let me assume the debt, approximately 600K, 400 to him in paper debt, 200 to creditors. And I'll run off. And if it doesn't work, at least you walk away from the 200 to the creditors. And it's like, he said, sure, of course, take it, run with it. That was an electroplating company where we did one little process by hand. We called it brush plating, where we repair aircraft parts. So went right out to aircraft operators, started with helicopter operators and said, hey, we can save your $10,000 part for $1,000 or $50,000 part for $5,000. And we used our process, outsourced machining. That first year, there were only 3 of us left standing. I couldn't afford to pay the 2 guys that were with me, but I gave them some provisional equity. And I remember when I offered it, one of the guys said, it'll never work. We don't have money. We don't have customers. We don't have equipment, but sign me up anyway. I just want to see what's going to happen. And the other guy said, oh yeah, it'll absolutely work. Did that first year. We did well enough, almost went out of business probably 15 times, but we did well enough, going through that. And the guy that said it would never work, when I sold it in 2016, or we sold it, he got a check for over $30 million. So it was a really good deal for the small amount of equity that he got. And so many lessons along the way. And so from that first one all the way till now, 8 different companies. That first one that I bought, I actually closed that in 2002. Started Able Engineering in 95, Able Aerospace in 99. I combined 2 of those together, those 2, and sold them in 2016 to Textron. It was a very nice 9-figure exit. Great deal for them, great deal for us. They're still rocking and rolling, 8, 9 years later. I'm so proud of what they've done with the company.
Was that just kind of once you got through that first year, just that easy, walk to the top?
What's interesting, and one of the things I like to talk about to CEOs and founders that will often complain, and I've listened to some of your podcasts and they talk about how hard it is and almost wanting to give up and, going through it. And I'm thinking, be the CEO that your company needs for the stage that it's at. And if you're stuck, and we had several different places where I think we kind of got stuck. You mentioned it before we started recording. We got stuck at this $8 million level for a couple of years. Then we figured something out and we took another big jump. There were lots of this. It was sort of like you figure something out, you take a big jump up and then you plateau. Then you figure something else out, you take a jump up and you plateau. On average, over the 23 years, we had better than 20%. Let's just say the last 15 years of that journey, better than 20% compounded annual growth rate. Early on, it was bigger than that, so I don't count that. It's super easy to go from 0 to something, along those lines. But yeah, lots of lessons. Even when it was really hard, I knew I had the right team and the right culture, because the harder it was, the harder we laughed. And I've learned, I started this value creation cycle a long time ago. Like, you struggle to get a capability, builds confidence, use that to create value, and then take a bigger step. And literally my start in this whole journey is 6 years old, pulling weeds for 25 cents an hour. And in the late 60s, that's a lot of money. And it was a neighbor I didn't know, wasn't a friend, wasn't a family member. So it was a real exchange. And then that went to shoveling snow and mowing lawns and paper routes and dishwasher, busboy, cook. Super low income family. My parents kicked me out of the house at the beginning of my senior year in high school. I was already financially competent and more than enough to be independent and get my own apartment and go forward. But it's that value creation cycle. And often it's really, really hard. So what? We can't develop without effort. And so a little bit of effort, a lot of effort, really struggle super hard. I get this warm feeling inside the harder it gets sometimes, because I know it's going to be amazing when I come out the other side. So kind of back to, we need to be the CEO that our company needs for the stage we're at. Don't complain if I had this or when I get there, things will be different. I always say, nope, it won't be. You have to figure this out, struggle through it, struggle better, and then you'll get there. So I've got lots of those stories that I can share that everybody has. The only perspective that is different for me is I didn't act like a victim, and I don't complain about the hardness. I look at it as the most amazing learning journey.
No, I truly respect that. I think the biggest thing that I see with the smaller business owner is they drive sales hoping it will solve all problems.
Mm.
And as we get into your book, we realize that that alone is not the only metric to measure. You had a phenomenal value prop in the sense that you could go out into the market and sell a solution that was 10 cents on the dollar to a problem.
In a lot of cases, yeah.
Yeah, that's not that hard to sell. Now, the question is, did it cost you 12 cents to sell 10 cents? Because then you have a problem. But if you could do it for 4 or 5 cents, then you've got a phenomenal business model. I don't think people know what those numbers are. They
Yeah.
don't know the value pricing. Because honestly, if I were to talk to you, I would have said, well, why didn't you go for 20 cents on the dollar? I mean, you could have 10x'd or 100.
Yeah, well, every business model is a little bit different. And when you looked at the work that we did, the alternative for most of our customers is buying a new part. And an aircraft part, as you can imagine, is quite expensive. And what we did before I bought the company and went out directly to aircraft operators is we might charge, if we got lucky, as much as $300 to repair a bearing journal on a turbine engine shaft. And then our customer would grind it, inspect it, and sell it for $10,000 or more to the airline. My business model was, hey, let's go directly to the operator of the aircraft, charge them $5,000. We don't have all the grinding equipment we didn't in the beginning. At the end, we had everything. We could build an entire helicopter from scratch at the end. And when I sold it, and they obviously can still do it today, but we would subcontract it and we would charge a fair amount. And it was interesting. You can say, okay, it's really easy. Our gross margins typically were, when we settled into a core product, more than 50%. They range between 50 and 80%, probably averaging around 62%. So it's really good. We could start something at 10% margin or even a 10% loss, knowing that when engineering got done with it would be safer, more reliable, and it would get back up into the 70% range. So we understood our business and how that was going to go, but it was still hard. Do you think the OEMs liked what we did, the original equipment manufacturers? No. Every time we repaired something, they didn't sell the part. There were lawsuits that came up from time to time where they wanted to put us out of business for that reason. There were competitors that came in. There weren't that many doing what we were doing, but over time, when you create a market, competition will expand to meet the perceived business available. And then you've got, we competed, at least from my perspective, harder for employees than we ever competed for business. And we had 2,000 customers in 60 countries around the world. We were beating our competition in China on price. Getting people was harder. Getting the best people was harder than competing for the actual.
You did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, and interesting. And so let's get back to the numbers the way you're talking about it. And I love how you frame it in your three categories. I think about it as this giant value flow structure through an organization, starting with awareness. How do we make people aware that we're here? And then how do we, marketing, right? How do we generate qualified leads? What is a qualified lead? That's really big. And there's a closing percentage that should be in there, ideal persona client. And then you've got closing them. You've got the sales piece of it. And it's about profitable sales, not just revenue. Revenue doesn't equal profit. I wish it did, but it doesn't. And then right. And then you have onboarding of the customer. Then you have ongoing experience and everything that goes with it. In my aerospace business, all of the processing, manufacturing, engineering, everything that went into it. And when I sold it, we had just a little over 500 team members. There's a lot of stuff that has to go together. But at any point in time, somewhere in this value flow structure, we need more leads. Oh, we need closing more. Oh, we need customer experience to improve. We need quality over here to improve. So imagine looking at this dashboard and every single team had a most important number that was reflective of the value the team was designed to create. And also it has to do both these things. It reflects the value and it has to drive the majority of the right behaviors, because you can pick a number and knock it out of the park, but it doesn't help the company increase its value, which, by the way, just to kind of foundationally level set all of this, I think a CEO's job is to continually and responsibly increase the value of their business. And every single leader should be doing things to create value the way that team was designed to create it, that when they do it, it accretes up and increases the value of the business responsibly over time. Does that land well, Rocky?
It lands phenomenally well. What we've done is actually taken what you've said and turned it into a massive math equation. And the
Mm,
math equation starts with how many leads came in the door. As you said, what's my conversion rate? But then what's my customer retention rate?
mm,
Right? How often does my customer buy? Because that's all how we drive revenue. Then we're looking at gross profit. What does it cost me to make it and deliver it? And what I say a lot of times is I can see the numbers in the P&L, but I can't see the leak. The
mm,
leak in the P&L is a bad customer experience all the time, so that people are leaving because, you didn't do good onboarding, you didn't deliver good quality, you didn't do it on time. I can't see that in the P&L. You got to build numbers that drive that, but I can see the result in the P&L and go, something's wrong here, or
mhm,
something's wrong in the lead flow system or the retention system to be able to do that. Now, you said build value in a company. When I think of build value in the company, I think of the balance sheet, which I think very few business owners ever look at their balance sheet, know
mm.
how to read it, or know how to watch it. We look at a balance sheet month to month. Where is the change, and is it going the direction that we want it to go?
Yeah. And I think about increasing the value of the business, which you're going to see in large part on the balance sheet typically. And when I sold the aerospace company, to use that example, it was a multiple of EBITDA. And at the time we sold it, if you were this is aviation aftermarket, we're repairing and overhauling aircraft parts. If you were a really strong company in that space, you would get about an 8x multiple. We actually got a 21.6x multiple on a business that was very profitable, doing around 100 million in sales. And it was because of how quickly we got there, the believable story about how much we could continue to grow, the strategic buyer that came in. It was a really good deal for them as well. And we thought about creating holistic value out there. So within the team, okay, we need to improve cash flow and continually do better, and profitability, because that's a value of the business, and someday we'll sell, and we obviously did. But also there's emotional energy value, which to me is the X factor for the leadership in the company. I spent a lot of time on that early on, 70, sometimes 100-hour weeks. And it was fun. Like, it was hard, but it was fun. Never felt like work, because we were always moving forward. And the emotional energy was everything. It's like we're creating this environment from which everybody creates value. And at the end, it didn't take me 15 hours a week to run the business. And the rest of the time, I'm working with our 64 leaders and meeting with, key customers to land, bigger contracts. And then the third bucket I thought about, it's a bucket I call spiritual value creation, but at its core, it's connectedness. Lots of programs to strengthen relationships between team members. And the entire time that I had that adventure, I never had a leader quit, not even once. Had to ask a few to leave because we outgrew them or something happened. Somehow they shifted and it didn't match the culture anymore. And we were very intentional about that. But when I think about creating value in all three buckets, doing it in balance, you actually end up making a lot more money too. But I think I'd love to get your take on this, Rocky. So many focus on how much money can I make and how quickly can I make it. All I think about is how much value can I create in the world, and how can I have a really good impact on all the stakeholders as people. And I make more than the ones that only focus on money. And money's wildly important. When they say it's not important, to me, that's virtue signaling, because you look at what they do and it's almost all about the money. But what's your take on that?
The purpose of a business is to make profit and to create free cash flow. So money is the purpose, right? Now, can we go beyond that? Absolutely. What you talk about with values, if you think about it, if you go back to that stage where you were at $8 million working 70 hours a week, if you don't have a good culture and everybody's fighting everybody, you as the business owner are probably going to want to give it up because you hate your company. You
Yeah.
hate what you've created. Nobody who works there is enjoying it. They all want to leave. And you're like, I can't find anyone. I can't find good people. And I think that's a big part of it. Creating a culture that people want to work in allows you to get the best people that you couldn't imagine getting. It creates a line for workers, which in today's world, it's hard to get great
Mhm.
people,
Yeah.
but that comes down to culture. And then the other thing is the culture has to believe in taking responsibility. And you kind of mentioned this earlier, and I didn't get a chance to get back to it. When you pick what you call the most important number,
Mhm.
that number has to drive profit and cash flow. at some point, because if it isn't, then we've got a problem. I can't tell you how many stories we hear. Everybody hit their number except the business owner who lost money because they picked the
Mhm.
wrong important number, right?
Oh,
They
yeah.
didn't pick the most important number that was driving the results that truly that they needed. And whatever you set as a target, people will do. And so if you set the wrong target, you're going to have unintended consequences. And I
Yeah.
think people don't spend enough time thinking through that
Mhm.
to say, how do we do this right? And when you have transparency, and when you show people, hey, it's like take sales, right? Go, hey, if I'm going to compensate you, I'm going to compensate you on gross profit when we get paid, because that way you know to sell where we make the most money. And if you tell people that, they'll naturally follow that. They'll start to make their own choices. You don't have to pull them along. They just come, right? Because they're going after their best interest, which is your best interest. We have alignment from that. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? And I think you talked about that in the book.
Yeah, it does. When you say the purpose of a business is, profit, cash flow, and all of that, to me, that's a reflection of the value of the business, and it's incredibly important. I've never thought of my businesses as the purpose is to grow profit and cash flow. I think it's wildly healthy to continually increase the value of the business. It helps with recession proofing it, job security for everyone. The purpose of the aerospace business, safely reducing aircraft operating costs, that was our mission. It's what everybody did every single day. And the impact on all the stakeholders, not the virtue signaling stuff that everybody talks
Mhm.
about out there. That's why I did it. And that was really cool. When people ask me sometimes, hey, do you miss your baby? The aerospace company was like, well, no, my baby is the culture I'm creating now in so many other companies. I love that. That's my purpose for doing it. And if we don't grow profit and cash flow, we've got nothing. Like we can't
Yeah.
do any of this other stuff. So you and I are saying the same thing. I'm just running at it from different angles. And this point about most important number, and I recommend your listeners, if they're into it, read my book, Your Most Important Number. Super easy to find. You can find it at Amazon, 40,000 other channels. You can go to our website, etw.com, and find it. But this number, so for the company, it should reflect the value of the business. This is the overarching most important number. You're still going to measure other things to make decisions, improve decision making to continually increase that over time. And then every single function, marketing, for example, every business is different, but let's just say, for simplicity's sake, it's a number of qualified leads. And they define a qualified lead, so they want to increase the number and increase the quality continually. It's not about clicks or any of that.
Mhm.
It's about qualified leads. And then sales is about conversions. We're measuring the most important number is profitable sales conversions. And then as you go through the organization, HR is a big one as companies get bigger. And when I work with some of these larger organizations, and when they're big enough to have an HR department, it could be 50 employees, 100. I've worked with tens of thousands. Companies with that many team members. But when I ask HR, what do you think your most important number is? They'll often say, oh, it's retention. Like, okay, so let's make that your most important number. Now let's just play this out. Let's role play. You hired me to run HR. Retention's the number you gave me. We're 3 years down the road. I kept 95% of everybody. I won on retention. Never mind that 60% of them can't do their job, but I won. So we picked the wrong number. And so my favorite HR number is percentage of seats filled with capable people, capable being they can get the result. They've got the capabilities that are needed to get those measurable results, and they're at or above whatever that measurable line is. So when you go to every single function, what's the value it's supposed to be creating, who's the leader leading it, what's the best work the leader and the team or her team are doing to continually improve it, where did you start on your number, where you're going, are you on track, at risk, or behind at any point in time. That makes it so easy. And that's why with 500 team members in my aerospace business, in seconds I could see every individual, every team, whether they were winning or losing, red, green, or yellow, most important number. Seconds, I can go right to where I need to go in the organization and see if it's all in balance. And I remember when I showed it to Jack Welch in 2011, Jack used to run General Electric. He said, first words, boy, the transparency is scary. And he said, had I had this at General Electric, the results would have been exponentially better. So, well, explain that to me because you're a manager of the century here. How's that possible? And he said, well, for everything you've ever heard about General Electric, the best we could ever do is fully follow, track, and develop the top 5, maybe 600 leaders throughout the entire organization in the heyday of 400,000 plus team members. So that's interesting because you talk about Crotonville and all this leadership. He said, yeah, that's right, but once you got past that top layer, it was just checking the box, and so it wasn't really doing it. He said with our system that I put together, he could have tracked personally up to 2,000 leaders. And with that definition of why he said it would have been exponentially better, he's right. Like he was absolutely right. I'm just about making it, how can we make it a lot simpler so everybody can do less better focus. A lot of operating systems out there, they'll say, hey, create 3 goals every quarter, get it approved by your manager, rinse and repeat. That feels terrible for employees. But if I'm on a team and I've got one number and I've got a role and these are the outcomes I'm responsible for, and we're all contributing to moving that number, and we reset the goal every quarter, every year, and how we want to grow that number, that feels a lot better. It's like I'm on a sports team. What are your thoughts around that?
No, I agree with that. And one of the things I tell people is if you have employees who can dramatically improve your efficiency, bonus them like crazy. Like,
Yeah.
you talked about your parts and you talked about, well, in the beginning, we might lose a little bit of money on it, but then engineering gets a hold of it and they make it better. And you have a lot to do between that first lead coming in and that part going out the door and the collection. If there are people who can come into your organization, and I don't care who they are, it might be the janitor going, hey, I noticed, 10,000 pounds of scrap over here. By the way, we could do this with it. Or I noticed this, if you could make this change, you could have a big result. You've got to reward that. You've got to recognize that. And I think you have to pay for that, because now you're creating the culture that everyone is working towards hitting that number, even if it's not their personal responsibility. When I worked in corporate, everyone was just focused on their little thing. And it didn't matter if they could hit their thing, it didn't matter that their thing actually caused ripples of destruction all around, because that was how the culture was set up. And I know you talk big about the attitude of leadership. And I tell business, like, someone's going to create the culture. It's either you or it will create it itself. And if you don't like it, you need to look in the mirror, right? And say, hey, what have I done? It sounds like you did a very good job of being very intentional with all of this to say, we're going to work on the right things. We're going to create a culture and a way of doing it that fits that. And you found an area in the market where you had great opportunity, which makes it a little bit easier. And you continued to refine it and make it better and continue to expand it and grow it, is kind of what I took away.
Yeah, I believe that most leaders, when they talk about culture, what they want is for culture to help the organization do better. But when they talk about culture, I don't think most really understand what they're talking about. It's how it feels. Oh, we have such a great culture. It just feels warm and fuzzy when we walk in here. And I think the goal with culture is to connect culture to value creation. And so what are the attitudes and behaviors that cause the most value to be created? How do we incorporate ideas on what that is from every single team member, and then distill it down to a list or a set of alignment tools, behaviors, a mission, a vision, whatever's appropriate for that organization, and then hold everybody accountable to it. So we want to connect culture to creating value, and you can absolutely do that. And here's another giant miss in like literally every company that I meet with: business model. So when I ask the CEO, what's your business model? How does it work? They don't have the best answer around it. And when I ask any of their leaders, do you understand the business model? And just the basics, like how do we price? What's our pricing policy? And how do we know we're not overcharging and not getting work, or undercharging, leaving too much on the table? And then what are all the costs and approaches to providing our products and or services? And then what's the profit look like today? And the exciting part, what's the potential for future profit? So when I go work with any new client, and we install our mind management system in companies all the time, startup to quite large, I'll ask that question. And every leader, I don't care where they're at in the organization, should understand the business model. So when a leader goes in and they're frustrated with the decisions and actions that team members are taking, I can't believe they did this. Don't they know this? Well, they don't, because you never taught them your business model and how what they're doing, regardless of where their team is in the organization, impacts the business model. And so once you do that enough, all of a sudden, and this doesn't take very long, it's usually a matter of just a few months, those leaders are starting to question when something's happening. Well, how's that affecting the business model? I don't think it's going to. Like, it feels really good and you like it, but this other thing will make twice the cash flow or 3 times the profit or whatever it's going to be. So I think business model is really, really important. And I don't know what you're seeing, Rocky, but wow, it's a giant missed opportunity virtually everywhere.
And I'm 100% in agreement. And that's why we use those 16 levers, because it takes everything that you've talked about and puts it into one equation.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you change this part of the equation, what else is it going to do to this part of the equation? And then what is the end result? I'm a big believer in work less, make more. And too often, I think everyone is just pushing the revenue lever, and that's the only lever they push. They don't actually sit down and say, well, how can I deliver it more efficiently? How can I increase my prices because I'm delivering better value? How do I make the customer experience better? How do I do all of these things? I mean, let's face it, if you're happy at work, you have less turnover. So how do I create less turnover, which then again reduces training costs? Like, all of these things kind of come together. There's no line item on the P&L for them, but you can see the results of all of those things. And it's not always easy to see it unless you get an outsider to come in and look at what's going on and ask some of those deeper questions and help people see it all come together. And the other thing is, and I've noticed this a lot more, asking a simple question of everyone: who pays your salary? And I think a lot of people think, well, the company does. Like, it's got this magic tree out back that prints money. It's like, at the end of the day, the customer pays your salary. So what are you doing to make that customer experience the best it can be? And it doesn't matter where you are in the company, right? Whether you're in marketing, delivery, shipping, all of those things are about how do we create the best customer experience, deliver the most value. And a lot of business owners, I think, don't even understand what they deliver to the customer. They think they're delivering this, but that's not really what they're delivering. And a lot of times I don't think they understand that fully.
Well, and almost all the time, they like their stuff more than their customers do. The customers are buying it, so they like it enough, but they don't really have a handle on what their customers are thinking or saying about it or experiencing. So when you don't have a handle on it, how do you improve it? So that's another big category. Every leader should know exactly what our customers think about our product or service and what they can actually do in their part of the business to improve it. So 100% agree with that. Now, the stuff we're talking about, your 16 levers and everything, this should happen. It's so easy to say all this stuff. So the challenge is, how do you operationalize it? And so when and this is decades in the making, as I developed this mind management system, the acronym stands for most important number and drivers. The number is each team, reflective of the value, drives the behaviors that you want. You still measure other things, but only to help make decisions. The drivers are categories of work that each team can leverage to continually improve that number. So they're evergreen. It's your continuous improvement effort. So when you look at a team and you say, here's how we create value, we're on track, we're overdrive, we're under, but this is how we're going to get back on track. So I can see where they're at and the best work they're doing to continually improve it. And with this mind management system, how do you tie it all together and do everything you're talking about and make it easy and sort of catch fire on its own, where team members run with it? Most operating systems, and there's a lot of them out there, scaling up, 40X, OKRs, EOS, they make it more about, did you do the process right? And did you call it the right thing? And as soon as I start I'll talk to the top leader or two and they'll say, oh, it's amazing, it's incredible. Sometimes they say, oh, it screwed our company up and we dropped it, but it's incredible. Then as I start going down, the goals are terrible. It's like, oh my gosh, like 95% of the goals are not very thoughtful. They're terrible. The leaders it's like their products and services. They think the customers love them a lot more than they do. And they think all these goals and everything is working, but they're just terrible. And so I wanted to come up with an operating methodology that it's really simple, really easy. And one of my slogans is do less better. There isn't one team I've ever run into, or even a company, even as big as a $60 billion market cap, that has more than four things that create 80 to 90% of the entire value for the business. And until we're doing those three or four things, 8 or 9 out of us on a scale from 0 to 10, let's not go do anything else. And it's hard, like you get it going, and it's really hard to take it from a 5 to a 7 to an 8 to a 9 to a 10. And so because that's hard, they don't do it, and then they just grab the next shiny object and they run after that. And that's why they don't create nearly as much value as they could. So, back to this mind management system that we have, it's so simple, so practical, changes the language, changes the focus, it's fun. And every company that does it gets a step change, whether it's for profit or even nonprofits. We've done significant increases in the number of nonprofits and revenue.
And I agree with you. And I think off the top of my head, I don't remember, but maybe you can give us an example of when you're picking the number, what's a bad example of picking the number, and what does a better example of picking that number to measure look like? Because I think that's where a lot of people struggle. They don't know how to pick the right number to truly go after.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I already talked about one, HR. You could pick one that you could knock it out of the park, but destroy the company. Every single function has that potential, and so you're always thinking about the value. And you need to include the entire team in coming up with a number. They all need to be involved because they need to own it. Don't give it to them when it doesn't work. They can say it's your fault. They need to come up with it. So when you ask that question, how is this team designed to create value? Marketing, for example. Well, we need qualified leads, and here, so you could say qualified leads, but you don't define it. And they go after qualified leads, and it's just any lead. And all leads are not considered equal. And so it's mediocre at best, or qualified leads that have ideal persona client, closing rate percentage, and here's all the work we're doing to improve it. So that's an example of picking the right number, but not approaching it as well as you could, right? And all the other functions. So one that I know is near and dear to your heart, let's take finance. And I think it should be cash flow. And I think their job is to produce financial information and work with every single leader to help those leaders discover the few numbers that will help them make the smartest decisions to improve cash flow and profitability. And it's not like most finance departments, CFOs, they send out these amazing reports, and I'm good at connecting dots and I understand all of this stuff, but they send it out. I went through 4 hours. This is amazing. Thank you. And then I go around the room to the senior leadership team. How are we using this information to create more value for the business? They got nothing. Oh, I just look at it, what the sales were and what was left over. So finance's job is to, I think, continually improve cash flows. That would be their most important number. And they work with every single leader so they understand the numbers that they can impact and make better decisions. So what would be a worse number for finance, or something that isn't really working? It could be our most important number is really a target where we're going to deliver financial information that's accurate and on time. Okay, well, that's very mediocre, but if you did it this other way and everything was about cash flow and you're educating all your leaders, what's that going to do for the business compared to here's a bunch of reports that you don't really understand or use on time, even though it's accurate?
And I agree with you. It's one of the reasons, and it depends on the business, but a lot of times, rather than focusing on revenue, I rather that they focus on gross profit. How much money do we actually have left to run the business and have in our profit? And then the second thing with you talking about cash flow is, where's our money disappearing? And so for a lot of smaller businesses, the thing that we look at is, how do we change the time of when the money comes in? So I don't know how you did it in your business as you grew, but if they pay for that part up front versus 30, 60, 90 days later, it's a dramatic shift on how cash flows through the business and whether you can grow exponentially or whether you're constantly struggling because you turned into a bank and you're loaning your customers money and you didn't charge them.
I always thought of AR as the last step in the sales process. So it's not an order until the money's actually in the bank.
That's
and
correct.
It was important to me that AR had great relationships with our customers, because when they were struggling, we always got paid first. We got better deals. There were cases where they couldn't afford to pay us. They owed us, let's say, $100,000. And they would say, hey, come down to our inventory and take whatever you want. And we get $1 million in inventory that we could sell for the $100,000 they owed us. So it's the last step in the sales process, 100% kind of agree with you there. But for me, and for any business, every single piece of it should be focused on optimizing it. The accounts receivable, gross margin, like all this stuff. The engineering department, just before I lose the thought, at the aerospace business, they'd bounce between 40 and 50 engineers in there, mechanical, aerospace, and all that. They were in charge of optimizing what we had for reliability, safety, and profitability, and developing new products, because that's our future profitability. So they were like the keepers of future profitability. So their most important number for the engineering department was growth and growth margin based on the work that they did. Unbelievable, right? I've never seen another engineering department do that. It's like we just need to get a number of projects across the finish line. There's with growth and gross margin, you've got this 10,000 different repairs that we do and all these parts that we manufacture and helicopters that we refurbish. You own optimizing that, and you own these new products. And so sales could come in and say, my customer really needs this. And they'd say, well, we've got these 4 other projects that'll generate 10 times the profit. Why would we do that? Yay, we won, right? With most engineering departments, they would just do it. Yeah.
No, I love that. And kind of to your point that the sale's not over until AR is covered. That's why I want the salesperson involved all the way to the end. You don't get paid until AR gets paid. And this way, they make sure that they're with that client through the entire journey of paying for the project. It's not like they sign the order. They don't care what's on the order because they got paid and they ran away and let everyone else clean up their mess and
Yeah.
all the custom stuff that they promised. Oh, we'll have it for you tomorrow. And it's like, well, who's going to get it there tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, and for all the listeners for this show, where are the hidden relationship opportunities that you're missing? So I just mentioned one. I wanted, and still have it, anybody in accounts receivable needs to have an amazing relationship, especially with our biggest customer, AP folks. Amazing relationship. One of the things we did in aerospace is that our quality department would have an amazing relationship with the quality departments of airlines and large helicopter operators, and everything we did was commercial. And in having that relationship, we would see all of the problems. So we would take those back to engineering and we would solve those problems, and it led to more work. So for the listeners, as we're thinking about our business, even the smaller businesses, where are the really important relationship opportunities that we're just missing? And I think most don't even think about it. And most of the listeners, if they have a business, if they just thought about it a little bit, they'll probably come up with 2 or 3 relationships. Oh my gosh, I never thought about it this way. I'm gonna go start establishing.
And you know who gets treated the worst in the company usually?
Who's
It's
that?
the AP department,
Hmm.
right? Because everyone's calling them up screaming, what are you going to pay me? And they're not treating them nicely. Imagine, like you just said, if your AR is friendly with their AP, you're going to get your check before other people are. Your things are going to get through. And that still comes back to, especially for a new customer, that sales rep calls up 3 days after the invoice and says, hey, the invoice arrived. I'm making sure that the part was good. I'm making sure that we delivered the invoice correctly to you with the right PO, with the information you need in the correct way to the right person. Did we do all of that? And that again is just continuing that process. That AR person making friends with that AP person, being nice, maybe send over Starbucks once in a while or whatever they happen to like.
Send them a Christmas card.
Yeah.
We want to make sure this is as easy as possible, back and forth. How are we doing? What's going on? Instead, it's typically what you're talking about. It's like the IRS. No matter how much you pay, they give you this feeling that you're not doing enough, and we're watching everything, and we're going to audit you. And I've been audited so many times. I've paid millions and millions of dollars in federal income tax personally. It's crazy. If I was running the IRS, I would be handing out trophies and cookies and fruit baskets for those that are paying millions of dollars in income tax. Thank you, because you're keeping this amazing machine running in the economy. This is so great. And yet it's adversarial, and I think unintentionally adversarial.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership saying this is what you do and how you go through it. And it's no fun being in those seats on either side of it most of the time, but it doesn't have to be that way.
I agree with you. And I will tell you, I talk to the IRS from time to time for some of our clients, and I've always had pretty good results. You treat them nicely. and they're
Yeah.
just happy as can be to talk to you. And I think they're getting screamed at all day long too. So, a little niceness doesn't cost a lot.
Yeah, we can do work on both sides of that equation, no question. And in every relationship.
That we absolutely can do. If people would like to learn more about you, more about the book, your services, where do they find you?
Yeah, the best place to go is our website, which is etw.com. It stands for Execute to Win. Just go to etw.com. There's a number of things that we do. You can find my book there. I have a podcast titled Show Your Value, The Art of Value Creation. It's everywhere you can find podcasts, from YouTube to Apple, it's Spotify, it's everywhere. Also, I run Execute Mastermind groups. So these are CEOs that want to responsibly continually grow the value of their business. They're smaller groups. Everybody knows so much about each other's business. It's crazy how much better they do in that environment over all the others that are out there. And I've been part of most of those for a lot of years. And we also help folks implement the mind management system in their organization if that's what they want. If you get the book, Your Most Important Number, the very last section is a DIY chapter, if you will. And it's designed that folks can do this on their own. But if you want to go even faster, we can help you with that. And we have software that mirrors it. And I think tools really matter when you're intentionally creating value a certain way with your team members, if they can make it easier to sustain and scale your efforts. Tools don't matter like software if the team hasn't bought into it. So if you're going to create more alignment, more intentional value creation in your business, everybody should be on board with that, not just here's a book and let's see what happens, right?
Yeah, and I think too often people try to meld a system to their business or meld the business to the system instead of melding the system to their business. You've got to customize all of these things and adapt them to the way you do business. You shouldn't change your business necessarily to fit a system if it's not perfect for you. And most systems aren't going to be perfect for you. So you've got to kind of have that back and forth and that give and take.
Yeah, 100%. And our system, the mind management system, is designed with that in mind. Yeah, you don't change your language, whatever you call it, you still call it that. All the other systems, you change your language.
Well, you have to be part of the tribe.
I see why they do it, but it's not optimal for a lot of companies. Yeah.
No, and we've heard those complaints over and over again. I'm familiar with some of the ones you mentioned, and I realize where the holes are, and I just come along and say, "Hey, you have these holes in the system. We fill them. Can we be of assistance?" And
yeah,
that's the way it works.
The work you do, Rocky, is so valuable. Your customers are lucky to have you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.